we are. Okay, so what is our presentation called here? I think it's Imagining the Branch of the Future. And if I'm not mistaken, Gina told us earlier that that was all BS. So I think we're coming out of the gate behind.
Right there.
Thanks, Gina.
Yeah, thanks, Gina. That was helpful. So anyway, we've got an established, really great panel of leaders here in various roles within branch distribution. And I'm excited to moderate the panel, and also very much recognize that with Truist and U.S. Trust and Regions here on the panel, that you're not here to see me. So I'm going to try to remember my role and ask the questions and not answer them very much. So before we get started, just wanted to have everybody introduce themselves. Again, all in similar spaces, but slightly different roles, to talk a little bit about what you do at your bank. And if you don't mind, a relatively updated branch count would be really helpful. Let's just start with you, Shona.
Shona Callahan. I am with Truist. I am the workplace planner for workplace and retail design standards manager director as of January. So we have about, I think we're right under 2,000 branches right now.
Very good.
All right.
Dan?
Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Hoke. I'm with U.S. Bank, headquartered out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I have the responsibilities of branch transformation, branch real estate, and ATM banking, and we have roughly 2,300 branded locations.
I am Stephen Griffin from Birmingham, Alabama at Regions Bank. I basically run the retail distribution and retail network strategy for our company, planning the market plans, physical distribution, design, you name it, we do it. And we have about 1,250 locations right now.
So I heard 2,000, 2,300, 1,250. So what's the math on that? Like 5,500, give or take?
5,500, yeah.
So add my 7, and you have a pretty good number there. So exciting to hear what you are all up to in your respective organizations. Just for the purposes of the group out there, as you could tell, we have some seasoned veterans running big businesses. They are not futurists, but we're going to do our best here not to talk about robots, but talk about what we really think the future looks like in retail banking. So
actually, I have a story about a robot, so we'll get
you
to that.
Do? Why don't we start there, Dan?
Well, futurists. So looking ahead, you have to imagine all the possibilities. And we do have a vendor that we work with, SLD out of Toronto, who does some work in China, and most recently shared with me the authentication operating model, so to speak, in China is now including, you might call sort of greeting robots. And so it could be, what could it look like 10 years from now when you're looking at welcoming a customer? I'm sure there's different models, right? You might have a full service model, but what would a self-service model look like? Maybe you have a robot.
I like that. I like that. Would love to hear the other panelists' thoughts on that. I have to share, I was talking to Jim Maroose last night, and I said, back probably 7-8 years ago, you did something on Erica and AI at, I think, like an American Banker forum. He's like, yeah, everybody thought I was crazy back then. I was like, you were right. So, yep. So what does everybody else think about?
Well, I think one of our topics, we were thinking of banks that have gone a little bit forward, and I think Bank of America has done something, not quite a robot, but a person you would come up to and you'd speak to them on the teleprompter, maybe I'll call it, and maybe we could have a mirage of a person that could greet you, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, hologram.
Holograms, that's what I was going for.
It might be Tupac, even.
Yeah. Of your choice, a greeter of your choice.
You have to localize it to your market, right?
Oh yeah, I'm in the South. We could have the good old boy, talking that country accent.
You could have, what's that guy who just retired from University of Alabama?
Oh, give me a break.
You could have him.
Who, Nick? No.
Highest paid public employee in the state of Alabama.
Absolutely, but no, yeah, we laugh about it, but and we had a little fun at Dan's expense when we were preparing for this, but it really is something it's not too out of the question. I mean, just think about it, 30, 40 years ago, the ATM was,
Right.
This ATM, yeah, it's not going to be popular, and man, we can't live without them.
We did have a little bit of fun. I think we debated calling this session iRobot, but decided to
Well,
go with that.
I do think it gets on the theme of 10 years from now, the business models.
Right.
And one of the challenges that we have in the regulatory and the economic environment is something that reminds me of my kids used to play soccer, is that they roll the ball out, and then pretty soon, if you had a 5 or 6 year old, you remember where all the kids were around the soccer ball? Is that everybody bombs around the soccer ball. And one of the challenges that we have is that we have these parameters that we have between regulatory guidance or economic conditions, and largely we end up being challenged looking a lot the same. I would say 10 years from now, I'll throw this out, is that there'll be a divergence in business models. One between maybe an efficient business model, one that uses technology to try to digitize and take expense out of the business model. Maybe there's a robot, maybe there's some automation. And then I'll throw out, there'll be some business models that will begin to separate and be full service, and perhaps look at more of a concierge, and maybe that's more of a wealth management model. But I don't think that's too far-fetched to say a divergence in the marketplace, because if you look at the economics of our society, particularly in North America, we have a lot of challenges in our society with the mass market and the economics of our population, and a smaller percent of the population that's separating in terms of wealth accumulation. So what does the business model look like to adjust to that?
Right. Let the data drive the decision making. I think Ms. Bleedorn mentioned that earlier today. So.
Yeah, we've heard a couple of times, meet the customer where they're at, right?
That's right.
We're going to have to do that 10 years from now. To Dan's point, we talked about that in one of our meetings. The demographics are going to drive what level of model you're going to use in that, and you're going to have to, my bank, we are a plethora of mergers. We've got rural and urban. I've got branches in Miami. I've got branches in, the little town Mississippi with 12,000 people. I'm not going to put a robot in 12,000 people, but I am going to come up maybe with that concierge.
Right.
But in Miami, I might do that completely different, using a lot of AI, using a lot of,
Exactly.
your robot greeters and things like that.
Yeah, AI could definitely help out in that, kind of bridge the gap there a little bit.
Good. So let's talk a little bit about, and Michael mentioned this in his opening comments yesterday. We have this great, we're gracious for it, this conference for BankSpaces. But there's restaurant spaces and retail spaces and all these other industries that face challenges with designing their spaces and meeting the customer, not just where they are, but where they're going. What do you see in some of the other segments or industries that you admire, that you think really might apply to banking?
Well, for me, I don't know if it'll apply to banking, but I hope one day it does, is Target. I'm addicted to shopping at Target. I go on my app, I pick out all the stuff I want, I say I'm on my way, and then I show up and I say I'm at this parking spot, and then, oh, by the way, they're gonna bring me a cup of coffee along with all my groceries in the back. I hope someday or one day we can preempt what I want to do at the bank. When I show up, they're like, hi, Shona, I know exactly what you're here for. Right. Or maybe you need some change, or you need certain dollar amounts if you're in a business, and it's already pre-set for you, and it's there for you when you arrive. So that's not any waiting, and they greet you by name, and I think that's a great way to engage a customer. So I hope Target kind of takes over some of the stuff.
Good. Stephen, what about you?
What she just described, and what I think is out there in the retail space today, is that dreaded word that we've been saying since I started talking about, and Gina, forgive me, I'm going to say branch of the future. I know you're out there somewhere, and I hate that term too, because it changes every day. It's the branch of next week. Let's just be honest with it.
Yeah.
But we've also said we want that omni-channel experience for the customer. In the future, we've got to establish a branch design that does exactly what you said. We've got to, it's building that omni-channel experience that when I walk in, when I come in, say Verizon, I go in there today. They're a retail store. I go in there today, I plug in. They know exactly what I'm there for. Right. They know what I'm doing. And by the way, I've got 50,000 things for you to look at while you're waiting on me to serve you, and I'm going to sell you those products. And I'm making a decision while I'm in there. Okay, yeah, now I do want to go ahead and get that iPad. And guess what? It's only X dollars a month, and I can do that. But you really are coming into the branch, and okay, you're coming in here. I would see us doing something either with a AI greeter type of thing. And when we sign in, that we're there, we're now selling to that customer, talking to that customer. I mean, think about our associates are going to hopefully talk to them about leads, give them the advice and guidance. And I think it's still going to be where we're pushing toward at that point, because that's what we're going to be needed for, not necessarily transactions. But there, they can get that experience right there while they're waiting on the pad or whatever they're using. Let's say it's even one of those things where they just pull out and it's their Google glasses or whatever it is, right? I'm thinking futuristic now, okay? Stay with me, but
I like it.
they're talking about, oh, well, have you thought about a mortgage? Your kids are getting this age. Have you started talking about college tuition? Have you thought about those things, priming them to be ready to have that discussion when they sit down with our bankers?
I love that. Dan, any thoughts on that?
Oh, I have a little bit different angle for our audience, which is thinking about other services in other countries. And I recently had a chance to go to Netherlands on some technology work. And it reminded me when I was there that the Netherlands and their banking system has different service expectations. And I think that in the next 10 years, some of those things might apply here. I'll give you two examples. The first has to do with safe boxes. So the largest banks there have made a conscious decision that there's some services that they're not going to provide.
There we go.
That was unexpected.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one.
We have
Less
some-
things to think about.
Let me get safe box
I need
fans
that space.
or not safe box fans. Yeah. Again, there's an example right now in other countries where making choices about different services and not being all things to all people. The second part that I'd share with you is a consortium of ATM providers. So the top 3 banks in the Netherlands actually formed a consortium and outsourced their ATMs. Now, I'm not saying that in North America, the states are going to replicate that. But what it does remind me, as you were asking about different service levels and the examples, is that in the next 10 years, I do believe in the financial services is that we're going to see some separation between those providers that continue to prove and show that they're going to offer all things to all people. And I think that there's going to be some that are going to peel off and have a more focused value proposition and not offer all things to all people.
Okay, I'm going off script now with my question, so apologies, Shona.
Ouch.
I know you didn't want me to do this, so I'm going to start with Stephen over here. And one of the things that I think Dan is hinting at is niche banking. And I believe all of you folks and my little bank are full service institutions. We have things that we're better at and specialize in, et cetera. How do you see that evolving, between now and 2034? Do you think you see more niche players in 10 years? Fewer? Is there, kind of a carve out of full service banks versus, I don't know, not just digital banks, but business banks or mass affluent banks or what have you? Any thoughts on that, Mr. Griffin?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think you've got to look at it from the standpoint of, I think we're trying to start seeing that a little bit now. Frost did something like that in Texas recently. They said, we're rolling out branches, and by the way, we're not worried about the consumer side of it. It's the commercial side we're really focused on. But I do think as we go, we've got to think about, and I'll kind of table it from a different angle. We've got to think about it from, not only are we niche banking these type of customers, you're going into a market you need to understand. I'm a big data geek, so bear with me. But demographics are important to me, and understanding what the customers are going to want to do when they come into our branches. We've got to be robust in that. We've got to understand what kind of customers we're dealing with, what they want. Again, meet them where they are or where they're going. But we've got to design that physical facility to do that as well. So whether that is, sitting down with them on a couch and talking with them, and there's no teller line, there's nothing in there that would generate. I know we've had several designs today where you see similar things like that. I think that's where we're going to continue to go, and the technology in that's going to help promote that for us, right? They're going to be able to use the technology that goes with that. But I could definitely see us in a wealth type market really focusing more on, I'm here to meet you and I understand what your needs are, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do it in an environment that is a comfortable environment for you to talk in. And oh, by the way, I can get anybody you need to talk to because I'm going to put them on screen with you. And again, it's that floating digital screen in the middle of the branch. It's not on the wall.
Sure.
Okay, so we got to get that futuristic piece in there. But I can talk with anyone you want to talk with while we're here, and be able to contact them. But I could see that being a big play. It's already a little bit in play now, and it's probably going to get more important in the future.
I have a follow-up question for you on that.
Oh boy.
No, it's good. It's good, really. So we heard from our friends at TD earlier about, and we saw all the various slides about TD Wealth Management going into the branches and being a fully integrated solution. Stephen, you just mentioned video conferencing and things of that nature. What do you think about hub and spoke models for services that maybe like you do teller at every location, but with the advent of technology, it's easier and easier to do wealth or business banking or whatever from a centralized location, but pipe it in. Does that have any legs or no?
Oh yeah, I definitely see it having legs. It has somewhat legs today. A lot of us use flagships and branches around them to deliver that today. However, I see it being more real time in the future. We've got to get to the point of where when those customers come in, if you really want to capture their business and capture that relationship, being able to serve them right away with that need, where they can at least have that opening discussion with an expert instead of saying, I'll have somebody get with you in 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 days or whatever it is. It's a real-time discussion right now. And in fact, I mentioned this in one of the discussions. I see this in the future of hopefully through regulations and everything we can do this, but I don't know about you guys. We joke about this around the fact that I have 5 kids. Okay, I've got 3 stepchildren and 2 children of my own. They keep me busy. I can't always pick up the phone and talk with someone, or I can't always go to the branch. Can you meet me at home is going to be the big thing, hopefully in the future, where we're doing that from those types of locations where I'm meeting you at home and I'm talking to you video conferencing and I'm helping you with your banking needs in different banking hours, right? Banking hours are no longer 9 to 5. It's whenever I can meet you at home and things like that. So, but yeah, that hub and spoke need is there today, and I think it's going to continue to be there, and it's going to get more, back to what you were talking about a little bit with the wealth management commercial pieces and things like that. It's going to get more specialized where you can afford to go and plop a branch. You're serving the consumer community here, knowing you're serving more of a wealth client here, things like that.
Great. Dan, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think that the hub and spoke is something that follows along probably 10 years from now, more of the hub need. I do firmly believe, and I'd love to get other points of view through the Q&A, that we're going to see actually
Good plug.
yeah, I threw that out there.
You do.
That we're going to see that we do need financial centers for people to meet with customers, and there's a high degree of financial anxiety in our nation, and everything that you see. Somebody mentioned TikTok and financial advice online. That really the ages of maturing wealth and management are looking for financial advice. It's a challenging environment, particularly for young people to buy home ownerships, and so the idea that hubs house places where people can have comfortable financial conversations when they're not comfortable having them anywhere else, including at home, I think is clearly a direction. The other side of that is, you might say spokes or service. I do think that we're experiencing some form of digital maturity. And what I mean by that is that it's really hard to win new market share with exceptional technology right now. You can lose market share by not having adequate or satisfactory. You get customers and prospects will repel from something that doesn't work, but the discretionary investment to be even better is really hard to win market share with mobile or digital technology. And so there's this table stakes. And those that have adopted to it have rapidly adopted, and then the adoption from here on out is more trickling along. So you have to think to yourself, what is it that's going to be appealing to new customers and prospects that do more business with you if everybody sort of has this table stakes of technology? And it's going to have to be a combination of execution. Somebody mentioned omni-channel before, is that you have to execute know your customers, pull it together. But ultimately, if everybody has some form of digital service, self-service, assisted service, the distinguishing characteristic, I think, is going to be these hub type of know your customers and a willingness to meet with them in the marketplace.
It's kind of interesting, right? You think about it, we're talking about hub and spoke, and not that it's a new concept, but a newish concept. But where did bank branches come from? You had main offices and branches. Branch is a spoke, right? So pretty interesting. Shona, what do you think about specialization and remote?
I agree. I think it's already kind of happening where we've all realized we can't be everything to everybody. The laughing or the clapping for safe deposit boxes, that's a choice. You're choosing not to have those customers come to you for that service. And I think banks are going to specialize in certain advice or financial advice for small businesses. They're going to really hone in on small business, being that bank to be, known for helping small businesses. I think is going to be huge. You can kind of see it already happening. Especially at Truist, that is definitely something we're focusing on. We're focusing on, with the COVID and community heroes, that was also something. So being a community supporter of healthcare or EMTs, fire, we're really reaching out to those. So we're being very direct on like who we're going after. And I think all banks will probably, there's going to be the larger banks that are going to try to be everything to everybody. But as you start to get down into like the sixth bank, we have to focus on certain aspects of the client that we want to hone in on and be that specialized aspect for them. So I do see it kind of peeling off and being specialized.
Good. So you segued nicely into the next question. So at Truist, what are you working on now that you think is going to be a core part of the branch experience when Michael and Chris invite you back in 10 years to talk about what the branch looks like in 2034?
I hope in 10 years. It was a unique experience to be made into Truist. We were made into it. We were merged of two other banks, and it was basically like, what are you going to be to your clients? And really, with that North Star, we said we want to be the financial advice bank. I don't think we announced that to everybody. So as we were planning the design, that is exactly what we were focusing on, is how are we going to have that branch be a classroom setup. So it might not be a community room that's not activated, but it's a waiting area by day and then event center by night, or a financial classroom by day. In the middle of the day, you can have financial classes on small business, the how-tos, like how to get a mortgage, how to retire, so I feel like in 10 years, I hope that's where Truist is heading. I don't know if other branches or other banks will go that way, but that's where I hope we end up. And I feel like a little selfishly, I feel like I've designed the branch of the future, and now I have to wait for that back of house space to catch up because the technology isn't there to support it yet. So I'm still kind of rolling out little traditional branches on the side, but it's there and we have it set up to be that. And there are certain branches that we have rolled out that have taken that and really rolled with it. And you're just like, oh my gosh, you see them on LinkedIn, you're just like, yeah, you're doing it. And I wish I could send every other teammate there. And I feel like maybe that's that change management aspect that we haven't really leveraged yet. I don't think we're ready. But that's in the next 10 years, I hope that's what I see classes going on at a Truist rather than a bunch of line of transactions.
That's really great. And so I'm going to put that on the back burner for a second, that question, because I think you touched on something really great. And we heard, I think it was Gina earlier, sharing the Comerica experience, and they have co-working spaces, you've got community spaces, so on and so forth. But we also heard from Jim that the front of your house can't be exceptional if the back of your house is broken. Paraphrase, sorry, Jim. So can we maybe explore that topic a little bit in terms of how do we bring the full bank together and really generate that North Star of branch banking in 10 years, like that really is the channel of, not the channel of choice, but really an effective representation of the entire bank experience for our clients. Dan?
Well, I'll start by saying I think it was Jack Welch, GE, many years ago said that execution eats strategy for breakfast every day. So
Yes.
while we spend time, and I love the reference to North Star, trying to identify who we want to be to win and serve customers. The whole idea about you might say the back of the house has a lot to do with success and the choreography of you can design all the branch features that you want, but the choreography and the change management, the adoption is just as important as what you can build, if not more. That was referenced earlier today about the community rooms. We had talked about that. Hey, what a great and fabulous feature. Why isn't that not consistently valued and being used? That's a good example. Or you could have some of the other examples of backroom operations and fulfillment of knowing your customer, and those are all good examples. I'll just say that what are we working on at U.S. Bank? Well, starting tomorrow, we're going to be working on the dog ATM.
Yeah.
So compliments. That was inspiring.
I love that, and the tie-in, and I was a little surprised to hear that you didn't think there was going to be a lot of media pickup on that, because the brilliant tie-in to the marketing campaign, unexpectedly human, unexpectedly canine.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's when you're doing it right, when it all comes together, right?
And the point, I'm joking about jumping into that, but the point that is inspiring about that is, again, think about what is it that you have to offer from your firm that appeals to the customers in your neighborhood.
Right.
And you can have all of the designs and features that you think might work, but it could be, again, the simple execution of what do my targeted customers and audience in my neighborhood care about. And I think that's a good example. There's other ways to do that, of course, but that was a good one.
Awesome. Thank you. Stephen, what are you working on today that you think, you know what, this is a home run. It's going to be like a central part of our experience in 2034.
Well, in 2034, I'm working on retirement. How about that? That's next.
I don't know. I heard about the 5 kids, so I don't know if that jives.
But well, I think we've talked about some really good points here. Here's what I'm thinking about, and I've been thinking about this a lot since we started talking about this panel. Is we're talking about 10 years from now, but there's going to be steps going along the way. And Shona, you kind of touched on it a little bit. We've got to determine as we start building toward the future, and it's really what I'm starting to think about today, right, is I've got to be able to take what I have today and transform it into tomorrow. So, or what I'm going to have in 5 years has got to be transformed in another 5 years, because I guarantee you what I'm talking about 5 years from now and what I'm talking about 2034 are going to be two different things. And we're evolving as banks. Now, are we followers? We talked about that a little bit. Yes, we are. Whatever you see going on in retail out there today and all the new fun things coming along, we'll be following them shortly. In some form or fashion, we'll figure out how to use it if we can get through the regulations. That's the other piece. We're so heavy regulated, who knows what that's going to look like, right? But I've got to think about my space that I'm going to lay out in what I'm thinking about today. I won't have that branch built until 3 years from now. Right? Okay, or 2 or 3 years from now. But realistically, that's what it's looking like when you scope it out. So I've got to think about, okay, well, what's going to be important then? Is the digital platform catching up? Because we've done a great job with the digital platforms Dan talked about, and it's kind of table stakes today. You've got to have a good one. If you've got a bad one, that's going to cost you. If you've got a decent one and a good one that can work, and I hope we figure that out by 2034, hopefully, because
figure out a new word for it.
Yes, that's a great idea, bro. I like that. But seriously, we've got to start thinking about how our spaces lay out so we can change. It's almost like you talked about. All of us almost have a kit of parts. I've heard that used a couple of times today. But I've got to be able to transform that location. What I built 10 years ago, I was planning on for what's coming right now. Now I've got to figure out, okay, this next step of what I'm going to have to build, what is going to be the 2034 look, and can I fit into that? And I'm guessing at a little bit of that. Don't be, because we don't truly know everything that we're going to have at that point. We didn't know what we'd have this time, but I think as bankers we have to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to look 5 years ahead, then I'm going to look 5 years ahead of that to say, can I take this and move it into the next step? And really what we ought to be looking at and planning for is, kind of like we've talked about a lot, I don't think the transaction's ever going to die. And in certain places, it probably will never die. And I can name a few. But in some areas, we're going to get that to a point of it's not really the important thing. So I better be ready for the advice and guidance, and I better be really good at it. I better be hiring the right people, and I better be putting them in place to do what the customer wants, because that's what they're going to look for. If I come in and I'm queuing you in and I'm trying to sell you all this stuff or give you the ideas, at least plant it in your head, right? And I'm not talking about a chip or anything. Don't be thinking of that futuristic. I'm talking about, I've asked you the questions while you're here. Are you interested in this? You should be thinking about this. I better be able to talk about that and better be able to guide them in a really good manner. And that's where I know our folks in our sales and service are working toward. They're really trying to work with our associates to become, all right, you really got to provide that guidance to our customers, because they're already looking for that today. That's what they're coming to us for. The surveys all show it out. I think that's going to continue in the future, but it's going to get bigger.
All right, so you just brought me to the next unscripted question, so I'll ceremoniously throw out my notes pages
Oh
here.
boy.
All those hours of preparation.
all that prep, Dan. Good thing I trust you guys. In all seriousness, I think probably the only other thing beyond omni-channel that's more of an overused kind of terminology is it's a journey, not a destination, right?
Absolutely.
But it really is. So you're talking about what you're planning for 3 years from now, or what you're building 3 years from now, you're thinking about and planning for now, right? And that's going to change 3 times in the next 3 years, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think we're any different than any other industry like that. Taco Bell's doing the same thing, so on and so forth. But we don't have, at least my bank doesn't have, the hatch like Chick-fil-A. It sounds like TD has a really cool space in University City. I want to go visit and play around in. And Mike's got the Bankers Playground out in Arizona. What are you all doing in terms of testing and whether it's prototyping or just kind of testing out different features that you're planning on putting in place 3, 5, 10 years from now? I'm not going to call on anybody specific. Anybody who has an idea.
Yeah, I can share. We think about all customer experiences across digital or physical as customer experiences, and so it's important to us that we think about prototyping and testing and doing customer research about how customers think about concepts that we're working on. Mm-hmm. And so you can either do that in-house, you can do it with a firm, but it definitely can lead you to prioritization of your next step. I would advocate heavily for taking action and progress and trying and learning and then following rapidly with iteration. We have learned in banking and colleagues that we have across the industry that banks have moved pretty slowly despite our digital and technology advancements. So I think as an industry, if you think about the next 10 years, I challenge you to say, well, what were you thinking about in 2014? I'll tell you what I was thinking about. I was thinking about, well, shrinking teller lines or cash recycling ATMs and things like, well, it's 10 years later and those things are slowly moving forward. You talked about hub and spoke. So you think about next 10 years, the journey piece where you talked about is get constant customer interaction, measuring, monitoring, seeking feedback, and then making iterations. But you got to keep moving. I think that the biggest challenge for the next 10 years is going to be speed. Whichever banks that can move will get more market share. Move meaning action-oriented, making changes. That's the game. Who can move fast and execute? Largely, that's a factor of a number of things post-pandemic. Permitting processes, decision-making otherwise. Regulatory is probably a big driver. On the other hand, I'm optimistic that in the next 10 years that we, coming out of the pandemic, will continue as an industry to ramp up.
We have, I feel like I think it was TD, it was like your pilots just become part of your pipeline. Like we're
Yes.
at that. We just test in real life. So if it works, awesome. If it doesn't, great. So you just got to learn in the field what's happening, because I would love to say, and not to say we haven't done it, but we have mock-up space that's in some, far off room that nobody has access to, and we go and do our thing. And we do have a huge ITC lab where technology does a lot of journey rooms and things like that, but we don't have like a mock branch where we're like, okay, we're going to set it up like this. And I wish we had the time and the funding to do so, but it's a lot of times you're just like, all right, this is the idea. We're going to just put it into true live construction, and we're going to test it out, and we're going to follow it a little bit and see what worked and what didn't, and learn and live from there. But it's usually live and not in a controlled environment.
And
I wish we could.
I'll build on that because I've been a part of a couple different experience labs where we put up demos of branch features. And I worked really well in the first versions.
Yeah.
But then as you talked about, you get those prototypes into the market. What I would advocate for is you pick a feature that you're working on and identify the best place to test it in the market. You don't have to go back to the lab. The lab helps you get to market, but once you're in market, I'd encourage that kind of application. Pick a location and change that feature, and then measure and monitor it.
Yeah.
You don't need to bring everybody back to the lab and start over again.
All right.
Yeah, Shona, I agree with you, and Dan too. You're nailing it. I don't have the lab space. I have lab space to test some of the technology in there, and we did. When we rolled out our last branches, we did kind of create a branch in the ops center where we could go in, but it was more to bring the people in to train them on how to work it. It wasn't about how did it flow. Luckily, it flowed well. But we tried some things along the way, right? To Dan's point, I think we have to be willing to try a lot of things along the way. And I'm going to ask a question of the audience. How many of you out there have executives that say, I want us to get out there and I want us to try this? And you say, okay, well, let us go to some of you do have labs and can go try that, but most of us don't. How many of them don't want it yesterday, right? I can't see if any hands are up from people, but
There's no hands up.
there's no hands up.
I can confirm.
I'm stunned. Think about it. I want to see what our branch is going to look like and function like this. By the way, I want it in a year. No way it's going to happen in a year.
Oh, no, I think no hands were up because nobody has somebody that didn't want it yesterday.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
All
So
hands are up.
okay. So when we're thinking about that, we've got to be able to execute quickly, but we have to do it smartly. We have to try some things. I have to try those things in my branches because I don't have the luxury of doing that. But Brian, you're right. And I'm going to tell you this. We joked about it at lunch. Branch of the future was such a big term when we were starting out and all this stuff. You and I and Dan have sat on several panels together talking about that way back. But I started to hate the term because from the time I started in 2014 to the time I got my first real full-scale Nexus location that we like to call New Branches Nexus, if I first got that out there, I changed design 3 or 4 times. And that was in 3 years. And we were adding things and moving things around. So think about what we're going to, that's what I was talking about earlier. And 5 years from now, I got to think about what 10 years is going to bring and how do I make that fit in. It's going to change every year going forward. And maybe some things will change a little slower, but it is. But we've got to be willing to test those things out, like Dan said. Just get in there and do it and see how it works. But I like the point about being selective about where you do it. Don't try to force something into a market where you know it's not going to fit in the future because it's a disaster. And that influences your outcome.
Yes.
That is a big thing that a lot of folks miss is if you're not demographically focused and data focused on your future plans, and you try to put in something that's not going to work because you want to do this cookie cutter, you're going to see some failure that's going to influence your outcome when you try to go back and study this. And then you got to convince folks, but no, look at how it worked here and it didn't. I know it didn't work here, but it worked here. Well, no. All we see is failure. And that's not a good idea.
To explore that topic more, if you're around tomorrow morning at 10:30, I'm doing a whole little thing on that. So
Nice plug.
Yeah, so stick around. We have just over 10 minutes left. I know we wanted to save some time for audience participation. So really hope these guys have really gotten the wheels turning and you have some good questions. Before we go to that, speed round, 2034. Didn't plan this one either. 2034, ITMs, more, less, same.
Well,
Speed
ITMs
round.
were not very successful in our markets to start with. I don't think we did the right job of marketing them. I think they're going to come back. I see it now. Think about the ATM. It took for a long time for people to catch hold of that. I firmly believe that's the future of those. But they may not, I don't think they're going to look like they look today. Let me just say that. They're going to be different. It's going to be, maybe it's the robot, Dan, that has money and stuff
There you go.
like that. Who knows?
Dan, more or less, same?
I think there'll be less, and I think it'll be less in general because I think ATM transactions will continue to decrease slowly. And I think it'll be decreasing slowly, but the environment for all of us will be harder because I think digital currency will start to intersect with cash, checks, and the United States. And so we as an industry have not been very good at taking things off the table. Over time, if you think about channels, is that we have largely as an industry added every conceivable channel that customers want, and we're all in it, whether that's call centers, ATMs, or otherwise. I think that the ATMs are extremely valuable on a business operating model and will continue to be an anchor for the operating model. But I think that the decrease in the ITM space, I think that the advisory centers will increase. I think that currency and cash will slowly decrease. I think our operating conditions will get more complex because digital currency will break through, and some banks will then add another channel and service to figure out how to work with customers. So
I'll add into that to Dan's
Yeah.
point.
Speed
While I say there's going to be
I'm
more.
scrapping speed round. This is good conversation. Go ahead, Stephen.
No, it's great because I think the space for it is going to be different than what it is today. I want to clarify that because Dan is right. I do think seeing currency come down.
There's no take
I think
back,
it's going to be
Stephen.
no, I do. I think it's going to be a service facility more than it is today, and that's why I'm saying it's not going to be the same as it is today.
Yeah.
You're going to be using that technology in a different format.
Okay.
I'll just say less. That'll be my speed round. Less ITMs.
Somebody
took them away.
Somebody who understood the assignment. Okay. No, seriously though, this is great. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about technology, and I'm looking forward to your TED Talk at Money 2020 about how digital currency is going to disrupt our cash business. So we should tee that up. I think that's a really great piece on ITM. So similar vein, thoughts. We talked a little bit about video conferencing, right? Do you see it, I guess, more or less or different?
I'm going to hedge my bets and say I don't know. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No. Again, that's kind of where I'm coming from. I think there's going to be a niche for it. I do believe we will use it. We should use it. We should be using it today, to be honest with you, more or less than we do. Think about work at home through COVID, right? It's now become the norm.
I'm going to check the more box.
Okay.
I hope so, because I've designed it into our branches, and they better be utilizing it. Yeah. But I think it'll be coming more into play just of the staff for that specialized, if it's an FA or if it's a wealth or whoever specialist might not be at every branch or available at that moment. So scheduling time with them via video conference so that they can meet the client where they're at, either in a branch or at home.
That at-home thing scares me. One of my good friends is a doctor that did a lot of telemedicine during COVID, and he had horror stories about people being on video. But
well, I'm going to.
We can talk about that at the cocktail hour.
I'll have a short answer. I'm actually going to take a contrarian point of view. I think that video conferencing with customers is not going to take off. I think that what's going to take off is screen sharing. I think that customers don't really want you to see them. They sometimes don't even care to see our bankers. They don't want to share what they're doing at home or what they want to look at. What they really care about is show me how to find this, show me how to do it. I think screen sharing will be the future.
Awesome. Okay, so 5 minutes. We're going to turn it over to questions. Yes, Chris?
Yeah, this is your chance to thwart Brian and my attempts, our evil plan, I guess, basically. Yes, sir.
So it goes back to what we were just talking about, to meeting the customer where they're at. I have 2 appointments with a government agency this month on screen sharing, and it's convenient. I mean, the appointment was a month out, but at least I got the appointment. I don't have to physically go there, and I can. And my wife is going to be at home. I'm going to be actually at a different location, but we can meet, go over what we need to go over, and be done with it. So I think banking should kind of move in that direction, and I hope that it does. I mean, you talked about that's one in your plan. So
Yeah.
I just want to share. I actually had a question, but you already answered it. It's really convenient. I mean, to be able to screen share and get the appointment, even though it was a month out, to be able to accomplish some of the things you want. Versus my wife have to go to that location, I have to go to that location. We can do it right where we're at.
Yeah, I think because of COVID, it brought a lot of convenience to people that they didn't realize they wanted, and
They
then
don't
once
wanna
they
give
had it,
back.
and they don't want to give it
Yeah.
back. So that it might not be on screen video sharing. When I think of video conferencing, it's probably more about screen sharing. Like we're having a meeting together, and I don't need to come and visit you physically, and my wife or your husband or whoever doesn't need to be with you as well. Like you could be here enjoying BankSpaces, and you guys can then later get on a video conference. Maybe not video, you don't want to see each other, but you're sharing the information and you're having that meeting and checking it off your list.
Yeah, I like the screen sharing. Trust me, sometimes you probably don't want to see what's on the end of that video. You know, if you see me at 8 o'clock in the morning and my hair's all messed up, I just woke up, whatever. But yeah, I think that's a great point. I like the screen sharing thought.
I love that, and it was a good reminder that our audience today isn't just bankers. We have this amazing supplier community that has perspectives on what we should be delivering to them as consumers as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
That was a great comment.
Anybody else? Were you raising your hand back? You had 2 hands raised.
All right.
Maybe not. Maybe she was just excited for happy hour.
Hallelujah.
2 more questions.
I guess
before
I have-
happy hour.
I have a question. What happens if you have a doggy ATM and the dog overdraws their account? Just kidding.
Yeah, or
Any-
it runs out of cash, runs out of treats.
Yes, here we go. Thank you. You saved the day we had to get to. So.
We got happy hour good too.
Stephen, you mentioned financial advisors coming to your doorstep or to your living room, and just because of convenience, and to that point around having some convenience in terms of screen sharing, we all are here designing spaces, BankSpaces. Is there, at least, have your teams been looking at virtual, or at least virtual spaces? With the advent of like Apple Vision Pro, that's only going to get better, and technology is constantly going to try to get more personal. I'm just wondering whether, like that screen sharing in a virtual environment, whether you've been dabbling in that.
Anybody? Is Carla still around? I think
Yeah.
there's some headset stuff going on at Synovus, maybe. Got it.
You know, I'll start by just saying we somewhat tried to do that virtually in the ITM world when we created an environment that looked like our branches for those associates to be in, and virtual environment behind them so that when they walked into our branch, they felt the same way as they were walking as they were talking to them online of what sat inside the branch, even though that associate was miles away from them in a call center. I do see that being part of what happens. I mean, think about today, you know, we talked a little bit about real estate and how we've shrunk the real estate as a whole as our company. You got a lot of people in different roles of mortgage, commercial, and wealth, and, you know, not necessarily the branch or call centers working remotely now at their own home. Some may continue doing that, some may not, but you got to create that virtual environment for that customer. If you want to speak with them, again, more screen sharing than speaking with them probably, because they don't want to see my ugly mug, I'll promise you that. But that is an environment we could create virtually for them.
I think our next roundtable, I'm going to ask our friend Corey LeBlanc about that because he's probably already developed it.
Probably.
Well, if we're following script, you are going to ask us about other banks that we might admire. And one of
I
them
was.
was.
We're
But I
now,
would-
it's
I
the
would-
count, the clock
I
is
would-
counting upwards
I
instead
would
of down.
say though, Bank of America has done some things that are like quite unique, and they just ripped the Band-Aid and saying like so they have created, they got it a little wrong because you got to go into a bank where it's all virtual. Like, why do I have to go to your location? Why can't I just do my own virtual reality with your virtual reality and we could just meet together?
Right.
Why do I need to go into your branch to do that? So I don't know if they've done that part of it, but they had half of it.
One last thing that I wanted to share, and that is thanks for the opportunity to be part of this panel. All of us, we agreed, invite during happy hour, if you want to share your 2034 branch space ideas with
Please.
us, we'll see you at the happy hour. We'd love to hear your ideas.
Maybe Chris will capture it on camera in the hallway so they can play it back in 10 years and see how wrong everybody was. What do you think? No?
Right on.
All right, this
That
was
sounds
a
good.
fantastic panel. Thank you all. I mean, look at the talent right here. It's unbelievable, this collection of